We're recording now the team ambassador panel, and I'll let the panel introduce themselves.
Hi, Mike DeSanti. I was the team ambassador for University of Toronto, as well as for University of Western Ontario and University of Alberta.
Awesome. I'm Michael, and I was the team ambassador for the University of Colorado in 2019 and 2018. I traveled to Bolivia with the team from CU Boulder, as well as to Eswatini, and had a blast being the team ambassador.
Hi, my name is Megan Smaida. I was a team ambassador last year for Penn State, and I am returning as an ambassador for Penn State again this year.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us and for answering the questions. So I'll start with the first question, which is, what do you wish you knew as a team ambassador?
So I'll take the first run at this one. One of the things that I didn't know going in was how to get information from my team about how things are going. So as a team ambassador, I interacted a lot, primarily with the chapter president. And I think that in a lot of cases, they were trying to be like, oh, Mike has a lot on his plate, so I'm not going to bug him with this issue I was having. So often I didn't actually know everything that was going on in the chapter until something really blew up. So I think that I often asked, hey, how are things going? And the answer was good. So I was like, okay, things are good. But I think that looking back, if you keep getting like that short answer of like, yeah, everything's good, dig deeper, ask some questions about like, hey, how's this thing going? How's that other project going? So that you know where things are starting to go a little bit off the rails sooner, so that you can help them get back on course. Because that's like a huge piece of your job as an ambassador, is to just support the team and what they're trying to get done. So knowing where they need that support is really crucial.
Yeah, Mike, I think that's really, really good advice. I would agree. I think that one of the most helpful things to know going in that I wish I had known was how to walk the line between providing too much support and providing too little support. I think you hit on this concept that you don't always know when your team needs support. It requires a lot of transparency from them to really know when they need support. But once you know that they need support, knowing how much to provide is, I think, also a challenge. As the ambassador, I think you're a coach and a mentor, and you're really supposed to guide them in the direction of finding an answer. I think that process of guiding can be really challenging because it requires that you have the end goal in mind and don't do everything for them, but point them in that direction. And so, for example, if it's with bridge design, not actually getting in and doing the bridge design entirely, but saying, hey, what are you struggling with in the bridge design? Like, what components of it are you having a hard time understanding? Can I clarify some like components of the bridge design process? And being able to be more of an instructor rather than someone that actually gets in and does it with them, I think was a hard thing for me to learn. It's like, oftentimes when people are really struggling and come to you for help, the most tempting thing is to be like, yeah, I'll just come in and help you and do this and largely like do this right next to you, rather than taking a step back and saying like, how can I make this a mentoring opportunity and a teaching opportunity?
Yeah, I definitely have to echo a lot of what Mike and Michael have said. I would say the biggest thing that I wish I would have known going in is kind of how to transition from being a leader within the organization. I came from being a Penn State, a president from Penn State's chapter to the ambassador, and kind of being able to take a step back into that mentor role. Whereas like, I'm not making the decisions anymore. I'm there to be a support system for the leaders and chapter members that are making their own big decisions. So I would say like, whenever a team member comes to me for advice, a lot of what I do is sometimes I follow up with a question of like another question of, well, what would be best for you as a leader? What would be best for you in this situation? And give a few things to think about. That way team members and leaders are confident in the decisions that they're making and feel comfortable that they in fact are doing these things and making these decisions on their own. And I feel like that goes a lot back to like the bumper bowling that's talked a lot about in this course, and kind of being that support system and not getting in there and doing the dirty work anymore. It's kind of being that guiding role. Yeah.
Thank you all for that. Great answers. And the next question is, what do you actually do as a team ambassador versus what your team thinks you do?
I love the phrasing of that one. I think that what you actually do as a team ambassador is you kind of sit in that Venn diagram between the program management team on the EIA bridge program and the team. So you're not kind of fully focused on the program management side of it, but you're also not fully in the team. You need to kind of be able to walk that line between them and kind of act as that kind of bridging those two sides together. Whereas I think that maybe my teams would have thought that I was in a lot of secret meetings with Ethan. A lot of what was really happening was me just like going through base camp, checking what their upcoming deadlines were, and just like, hey, are you like just sending Facebook messages at ungodly hours of the night saying, hey, are you okay for this? Is like this going on track? Is this on track? What about that that presentation you were going to do for some of the first years? Is that still going well? So a lot of it as an ambassador was just really being communicating a lot from the program, and then making sure that they are contributing what they need to the program, and in a lot of ways just being an external source of accountability. So if they have all these goals they're trying to accomplish for the year, I just try to be that external person who's saying, hey, have you achieved this goal? Because I know that once you start the bridge design, if you had a whole bunch of plans for outreach and all that stuff, everything else can kind of fall on the back burner. So I wanted to make sure that I was just the one who was bringing that back to the front burner and really pushing the accountability. Because I found as a president, it was really tough. I felt like I was just barely keeping my head above water most of the time. And I think that having someone else just kind of like pushing me to do all of the other tasks I needed to do would have been really helpful. So that's where I saw my role as the ambassador. Not like I didn't ever feel the need to do stuff for them. It was just to be the one to remind them of everything that they needed to be getting done, in as supportive a way as possible.
Yeah, I actually was thinking of something similar. What I was going to say as kind of the key difference between maybe what the team thinks I do and what you actually end up doing as an ambassador is that final thought, which is, as the team ambassador, I think a lot of what you do is remind them of all of the responsibilities that they have, and you keep the big picture in mind. And a lot of what they think that you do is helping them with whatever issue is at hand right now, right? Like, here's my emergency. I want you to help me with this. And it's like, yeah, I'll help you with that. But also there's these 6 other things that you've neglected that like really are also important. And although this thing is the most critical thing, and like, this is the thing that's getting all your attention right now, I'll help you, I'll assist you with that. But also here's the other things that also need to be prioritized. Let's find an effective way of delegating the different responsibilities to the other leaders on your team to manage this well. And so it's sort of like a managerial logistics kind of role of like, how can we shift the load? What loads are being neglected? Maybe more so than a kind of emergency support system. I think that emergency support system was sort of the central idea that the team came in with, but this more kind of holistic coaching, mentoring, viewing everything as a priority and keeping everything together all at once was more what the role was about.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with everything that was said so far. Kind of going in a different, like answering this in a different way, I would say that kind of a huge way in bridging that gap between the thought process between a team ambassador and what maybe the chapter thinks you are doing is building a huge communication network from the beginning. So from the get-go of stepping into this ambassador role, sitting down and talking with your team and explaining outright what your role is, so that from the beginning there's not really a question of what you're doing, and so that you both are on the same page from the beginning, and then kind of sticking to that communication throughout the year and never losing touch. And I think from there, it makes it a whole lot easier so that there's never really a question about this.
Great, thank you, Megan. Um, so the next question is, how do you recommend participating as a team ambassador?
So one of the things with being a team ambassador is that it's a time commitment. I didn't find it was a huge time commitment, but one of the things that you need to know is that you will need to be able to contribute some amount of time. And that's not to scare you off, that's just to be aware of it. A lot of it does end up being meetings. So both meetings with the program team as well as meetings with your team. And I think that that's really important. And one of the ways to make that easier is to just carve out times, even if you're meeting bi-weekly, just always set aside the same chunk of time for EIA stuff. That's one of those things of, if you don't have a meeting, sure, that's bonus time. Maybe that's when you read your reports, or, because there is a report review aspect of your role as a team ambassador. But I think really making sure that you're always carving out 1 or 2 chunks of time a week to do this makes it manageable, because I don't think that the time is actually a lot. It's just, if you don't make the time, you've probably already got a full schedule. So it can be difficult to fit this stuff in if you don't actually actively block it out in your calendar. That being said, the actual act of participating as a team ambassador is one of the most rewarding things. It's a great opportunity to just go from being very much in the thick of things as, a member of a student team, maybe a leader of a student team, and then both learn the ropes of the program side of EIA, because it's a completely different perspective, but it's also a really great way for you to give back and pass on all of those tough, hard-earned lessons that you learned as a leader and help the next generation do it better. And I think, throughout your career, you're going to end up doing that one way or the other. But to be able to give back to such an important cause and to such a great community, I honestly can't say that I've ever worked with a community that's as amazing as the EIA Bridge Program community. So to be able to be a part of the continuous growth and evolution of that community is just really an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as Michael touched on, it is a commitment, right? Like anything that you sign on to, I think you should give your time and intention to. I think that a counter to that is that the time is spent differently than it's spent when you're a team member. Megan touched on this briefly a little while ago, but basically, when you transition from the role of being a leader in your chapter to being in this more mentor, facilitator, instructor type role, it ends up requiring a different skill set than you're probably used to using. And there's time associated with building the tools and skills you need in order to do great in that new role. And so I would say budget the time for learning some of those skills and practicing them. Oftentimes people that end up as ambassadors maybe had some experience tutoring or teaching or taking on a mentorship role somewhere else. Maybe you built some of those skills there. But there's also a lot of resources out there that can help you. And so we're going to touch on this, I think, a little bit later, but one of the biggest things is to talk with your other ambassadors and talk with ambassadors that have come before you. So if you're stepping into the role, talk with whoever was in that role the year prior and get their insight on what skill sets are the most important to learn, and pick their brain about any resources that they use to learn those skill sets. Because I would recommend carving out some time to really learn that fully. It's a different role than you're used to. It requires different things. And if you put in the time and intention to do that, then you're going to be more capable of positively impacting and supporting your team.
Yeah, I definitely have to echo what was said so far. I think a couple big things that come to my mind are one, I think obviously the time commitment. And again, it's very different from any time commitment before, because a lot of it is very big picture thinking. So a lot of it is looking many steps ahead and kind of trying to figure out if the team may be falling behind in an area that they can't see because they're so head down in their work. So it's kind of your place to be very organized and diligent in that sense, and able to pick up on those types of things and be able to put time into the area to understand where the team is at versus maybe where they should be at. So I think that's definitely a big skill set that you'll learn and adapt to, and you may not be perfect at first, but it's definitely an acquired skill, and you'll get there. But just always think big picture. I would say another big thing is, again, I have to touch on the community aspect of being a team ambassador, and you really do get out what you put in. And really just building the network and relationships with both the team that you're mentoring is really invaluable, as well as the rest of the team ambassadors. It's really cool to see all the relationships that have been built, and really just staying connected throughout the country and world is really, really a cool thing.
Awesome, thank you. And the final question I have is that Michael alluded to is what or who is your go-to for resources and questions as a team ambassador?
So my first go-to was always the university binder. I actually think that that document has so much information, and I know it's evolved quite a bit since I was a member, and as well as when I was early in my career of being an ambassador. But that document has so much information. Almost every question you can think of has probably been answered there. Uh, the other the other thing that I didn't do that I should have done was reach out to the rest of the ambassador community. Something that I've really only realized in the past couple of years is if you only ever deal with, your chapter and the past team ambassadors of your chapter, you really get bubbled into like what your chapter does well, and you never get to take the blinders off and see what everyone else is doing. So I think really reaching out to your ambassador community for ideas, support, suggestions, sometimes just moral support. Like I know that becoming a team ambassador can be a little bit scary at first. So, you have a great ambassador community and reach out to them, leverage their experience, leverage their failures so that you can get the lessons that they learned from that experience.
Yeah, so I probably would go to other ambassadors before I would go to the bridge binder. I don't think that's a factor at all of the depth of knowledge by in one place or the other. The bridge binder is extremely robust. I would just say that the roles and responsibilities of the team ambassador often are things that are a lot harder for something like the bridge binder to answer. A lot of the questions that come up are more like, hey, I have a student on my team that is really struggling. They're really overwhelmed with exams. They have some family stuff going on. I just need you to talk to them and like see if they can, maybe try to, shift some load, let go of something so that they can give time to this project that they signed on to. It's like, I really need them, they're going to be the logistics manager on site this summer. Like I really need them to prepare for their role. And I just don't know how to help because, I'm trying to get all of these other components of the project together. That's something that the bridge binder isn't going to answer for you, and that as an ambassador you're going to have to figure out how to deal with. And I think that a lot of those challenging conversations that come up, a lot of those like instances where you're almost a therapist, require some input from other people that have done that kind of role. And so that's where as Michael suggested, like going and talking to other team ambassadors about what their experience has been in those kinds of situations can be really helpful. Certainly don't get in over your head. I think knowing what your role is and what the limits are of that role is also really important. That's also something that is sort of flexible and negotiated. You aren't a trained therapist. So if you're in that situation and a student is really struggling and it feels like it's going above your head and there's things that are insurmountable, there's other resources at their university, or here within EIA that can be tapped into that can deal with that in a more professional and robust way. And so I think knowing the limits of your role and then knowing how to handle the situations that are challenging but still within the purview of your role are things that the other team ambassadors can really help you with. I also just wanted to note that Ethan is extremely accessible and willing to help anyone in the bridge program with anything. As team ambassadors, you do sit in this cool Venn diagram where you are between the EIA bridge program and the chapters at the universities. And because of that, you are a little bit closer to the bridge program than most students at your chapter are. And so you can go to Ethan and you can say, hey, I have, either my entire team that is doing really well at this or struggling with this, or an individual student that's going on for, what would you suggest? And he'd be more than willing to help you and assist you with that.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question because there's so many different questions that are going to come up, and every question kind of has a different direction of where you're going to go to be able to find that answer. So I guess I'll kind of start with one. I know this has been talked about, but you'll start to find, I know this year at least, ambassador meetings are bi-weekly, but that may change year to year. But these bi-weekly ambassador meetings, really take advantage of those, because that's a great time to check in and be face to face with people who are going through the same things as you are and probably have similar questions to you. So really leverage that time to be able to ask anything that may come up and just get other advice and feedback from them. And also Basecamp is a useful tool in getting in touch with other ambassadors as well. I would also say sometimes questions come up that you can even go to the chapter themselves to answer. Like, it's not always the chapter or leaders within the chapter asking the questions to you. Sometimes questions are coming down from other team ambassadors and Ethan that you might be needing to ask these questions to the chapter themselves. And I would also say one thing that I've also done is, if it's kind of really a challenging area, I would sometimes even go to previous leaders within the chapter that I've had. So I went to my own project manager and old team ambassador, because I've had a really strong relationship with them and trusted their advice and feedback. And especially in the beginning, when I was still learning the ambassador role, I found their advice to be really invaluable. And so definitely leverage different connections you have, even out of EIA, if you have a leader or mentor that you think would be helpful in big picture areas to just get complete outsider advice. I think that's also really, really helpful in many situations. And obviously, above all, if you just have EIA questions in general, or finding or have new ideas or trying to find new ways to get involved, definitely talk to Ethan. He is an expert and loves to get people involved. So you can always go to him with anything as well.
Great, thank you. That concludes all the questions, and thank you all for your thoughtful answers and taking the time to do this. And I'm sure this will be really helpful to ambassadors in the future.